The sound of laughter echoed through my own front door as I fumbled with my keys, grocery bags weighing down my arms. It wasn't Trevor's laugh that made my blood freeze, it was the high-pitched giggle of a woman I didn't recognize. After 12 years of marriage, I knew every sound my husband made, but this laughter was foreign, intimate, and happening inside my home. I pushed the door open slowly, the bags slipping from my numb fingers and crashing to the floor. There, on my cream-colored sofa that I had saved 2 years to buy, sat my husband Trevor with a stunning red head draped across his lap. Her perfectly manicured hand rested on his chest while his arm wrapped around her waist like she belonged there. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't even notice me standing in the doorway. "Trevor?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. They turned toward me with the kind of casual indifference you'd show a stranger interrupting your conversation. No guilt, no panic, no shame. Just mild annoyance that their moment had been disrupted. "Oh good, you're home," Trevor said, standing up and straightening his shirt. The redhead remained seated, crossing her long legs and studying her nails like this was the most normal thing in the world. "We need to talk." I stood frozen, my mind trying to process what I was seeing. This was my living room with my furniture, my family photos on the mantel, my grandmother's vase on the coffee table. Yet somehow I felt like the intruder. "Simone, meet Cassandra," Trevor said, gesturing toward the woman like he was introducing a business colleague. "Cassandra, this is my soon-to-be ex-wife." Soon-to-be ex-wife. The words hit me like a physical blow. Cassandra smiled and gave a little wave, the kind you'd give to a child. "Hi there," she said sweetly. "I've heard so much about you." I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing, and my legs seemed to forget how to hold my weight. I grabbed the doorframe for support. Trevor walked over to the dining table and picked up a thick envelope. He handed it to me with the same expression he used when paying bills, detached and matter-of-fact. "Divorce papers," he said simply. "Already filed. My lawyer says it should be quick since we don't have kids." My hands shook as I took the envelope. The words on the documents blurred together, but I could make out phrases like irreconcilable differences and division of assets. At the bottom, Trevor's signature was already there, dark and final. "I don't understand," I managed to say. Cassandra stood up and walked over to Trevor, slipping her arm through his. She was taller than me, probably 5'8" to my 5'5", with the kind of curves that looked expensive to maintain. Her red hair was salon perfect, and her outfit probably cost more than I made in a month as a school administrator. "It's really quite simple," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Trevor and I are in love. We're going to be married. And since I now own this house, you need to pack your things and leave." I stared at her. "You own this house?" Trevor cleared his throat. "I transferred the deed to Cassandra last month. She paid off the mortgage. Technically, you're living in her house now." The room started spinning. I had lived in this house for 8 years. I had painted every wall, planted every flower in the garden, and paid half of every mortgage payment from my teacher's salary while Trevor built his accounting practice. "But I started to say." "You have 24 hours, Cassandra interrupted, checking her diamond-studded watch. "That should be plenty of time to gather your personal belongings. Trevor and I want to start our new life together, and frankly, having you here is just awkward." Trevor nodded in agreement. "It's better this way, Simone. Clean break. No messy custody battles or drawn-out legal proceedings. We can both move on." I looked at the man I had married 12 years ago, the man I had supported through graduate school, the man I had nursed through pneumonia and celebrated with when he landed his first big client. His face showed no emotion, no trace of the love we had once shared. It was like looking at a complete stranger. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked. Cassandra shrugged. "That's not really our problem, is it? Maybe you have family? Friends? A hotel?" I thought about my sister in California, my parents who had passed 5 years ago, my small circle of teacher friends who were all struggling with their own bills and families. I had no savings. Every penny had gone into our joint accounts, into building what I thought was our future together. "Don't look so dramatic," Trevor said, rolling his eyes. "You're a grown woman. You'll figure it out." Cassandra giggled and kissed his cheek. "Baby, we should probably start moving my things in soon. I have so many ideas for redecorating." They started discussing paint colors and furniture arrangements like I wasn't even there. Like I hadn't spent 8 years making this house a home. Like my whole life wasn't crumbling around me. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, holding the divorce papers and trying to understand how my world had collapsed so completely in the span of 5 minutes. The woman I had been when I walked through that door, secure, married, homeowner, no longer existed. In her place stood someone I didn't recognize, homeless, divorced, and utterly alone. 24 hours, Cassandra repeated, her voice now carrying an edge of impatience. Starting now. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice. I walked toward the stairs leading to my former, bedroom, each step feeling like I was walking underwater. Behind me, I could hear them resuming their conversation about whether to keep the hardwood floors or install marble. As I climbed those familiar stairs for what might be the last time, one thought echoed in my mind: how had I missed this? How had I been so blind to what was happening right under my nose? But more importantly, as I reached the top of the stairs and looked back down at them sitting together on my sofa in my living room discussing my replacement, another thought began to form, one that would change everything. They had no idea what they had just started. I sat on the edge of my former, bed, staring at the divorce papers with shaking hands. The legal language was dense and confusing, but one thing was crystal clear. Trevor was trying to leave me with nothing. According to these documents, I had no claim to the house, no right to half our savings, and no stake in his business that I had helped build with my own salary for years. But something didn't feel right. I remembered the day we bought this house 8 years ago. I remembered writing that check from my personal account, the inheritance from my grandmother's estate that she had left specifically to me. $50,000 for the down payment, money that had been mine before Trevor and I even met. I walked to my home office, the small room at the end of the hall where I graded papers and managed our household finances. My hands trembled as I opened the filing cabinet where I kept all our important documents. I had been the one who organized everything, filed everything, kept track of every receipt and record because Trevor was too busy building his career to handle paperwork. There it was, the original mortgage application from 8 years ago. My signature was on every page along with Trevor's. But more importantly, there was the cashier's check I had written for the down payment, clearly showing my grandmother's estate account as the source of funds. I pulled out more files, spreading papers across my desk like I was building a case. The original deed to the house showed both our names as owners. How could Trevor have transferred the deed to Cassandra without my signature? I was listed as joint owner with right of survivorship. Any transfer should have required my consent. My heart started racing as I dug deeper into the files. There were bank statements showing my teacher's salary being deposited into our joint account every month, mortgage payments coming out of that same account. I had contributed to this house just as much as Trevor had, maybe more when I considered that inheritance money. But then I found something that made my blood turn to ice. Hidden behind our tax returns from last year was a folder I had never seen before. Inside were bank statements for accounts I didn't recognize, with Trevor's name and Cassandra's name on them. Joint accounts. The statements went back 6 months, showing regular transfers from Trevor's business account into this secret account. Large transfers. Much larger than our business could afford. I kept digging and found more disturbing evidence. There were credit card statements for cards I had never seen, all in Trevor's name with charges for expensive jewelry, weekend trips to hotels, fine dining at restaurants we had never been to together. The total debt was staggering, over $40,000. But the worst discovery was in a manila envelope stuffed behind all the other papers. Inside were photocopies of checks from Trevor's business account made out to cash, all signed by Trevor. The amounts were substantial, and they were all dated within the last 8 months. The memo lines were blank, but I knew what these represented. Money being siphoned from his accounting business, money that belonged to his clients. Trevor was embezzling funds, and he was using that stolen money to finance his affair with Cassandra. I sat back in my chair, the full picture finally becoming clear. Trevor wasn't leaving me for love, he was leaving me because he needed a fresh start. His business was probably about to collapse under investigation, and he needed someone else to take the fall. By transferring everything to Cassandra and divorcing me quickly, he was trying to protect his assets from creditors and possibly criminal prosecution. But he had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated me. I picked up my phone and called my friend Nicole, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm downtown. Even though it was after hours, she answered on the second ring. "Nicole, it's Simone. I need help and I need it fast." "Girl, what's wrong? You sound terrible." I gave her a quick summary of what had happened, focusing on the legal aspects rather than the emotional devastation. Nicole was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Simone, listen to me carefully. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't leave that house until you talk to a lawyer. If you put down inheritance money for that house and your name is on the original deed, there's no way Trevor could legally transfer ownership without your signature. Someone forged your name, or this transfer isn't valid." "What about the divorce papers?" "He can file for divorce, but he can't just decide how assets get divided without court approval. These papers might be legitimate as a filing, but they're not a final judgment. You have rights, and it sounds like you have evidence of financial fraud. Relief flooded through me for the first time in hours. What should I do? Document everything. Take pictures of all those papers you found. Tomorrow morning, first thing, call Janet Morrison at Morrison & Associates. Tell her I referred you and that it's an emergency. Don't let them pressure you into leaving, and whatever you do, don't let them know you found those financial records yet. Why not? Because if Trevor is embezzling money, those records are evidence. If he knows you have them, he might try to destroy other evidence or transfer more assets. You need to let a lawyer handle this properly. After I hung up with Nicole, I spent the next 2 hours carefully photographing every document I had found. I uploaded the photos to a secure cloud storage account that only I had access to, and I made copies of the most important papers. Then I did something that felt both terrifying and empowering. I started planning. Trevor and Cassandra were downstairs, and I could hear them ordering takeout from our favorite Italian restaurant, the one where we had our first date. They were probably toasting their victory, celebrating how easily they had gotten rid of the inconvenient wife. But as I sat in my office, surrounded by evidence of Trevor's crimes and proof of my legal rights to the house, I realized they had made this too easy. They were so confident in their plan, so certain that I would just roll over and disappear quietly, that they hadn't covered their tracks properly. Trevor had always been arrogant, always assumed he was the smartest person in the room. It's what had made him successful in business, but it was also going to be his downfall. I heard Cassandra's laughter echo through the house again, that same high-pitched giggle that had greeted me when I walked through the door. Soon she wouldn't have much to laugh about. I picked up my phone and started making a list of everyone I needed to call tomorrow. The lawyer Nicole had recommended, my bank, the mortgage company, and possibly the district attorney's office if Trevor's embezzlement was as extensive as it appeared. But for tonight I was going to let them think they had won. I was going to pack my bags like the obedient ex-wife they expected me to be. I was going to smile and nod and play the part of the defeated woman who was grateful for their generosity in giving me a whole 24 hours to upend my entire life. Because the last thing they would expect was for me to fight back. And by the time they realized what was happening, it would be far too late. I woke up the next morning to the sound of Trevor's shower running and Cassandra's voice echoing from the kitchen. She was on the phone with someone, probably planning how to redecorate my house, speaking in the excited tones of someone who believed she had just won the lottery. "The master bedroom is huge," she was saying. "I'm thinking we'll knock out the wall to the office and make it a walk-in closet. Oh, and the kitchen definitely needs to be gutted. These appliances are so outdated." I lay in bed listening to her dismantle 8 years of my life while Trevor hummed in the shower like he didn't have a care in the world. For a moment, the rage threatened to overwhelm me. I wanted to march downstairs and throw the evidence of his embezzlement in both their faces, to watch their expressions crumble as they realized how thoroughly their plan was about to backfire. But I forced myself to stay calm. Revenge served cold was always more satisfying than revenge served hot. I got dressed quietly and made my way downstairs. Cassandra was still on the phone, now discussing whether to hire an interior designer or handle the renovations herself. She was wearing one of Trevor's dress shirts like she lived here, her long legs crossed casually as she sat at my kitchen table. "Oh, morning," she said when she saw me, covering the phone with her hand. "Trevor's in the shower. Coffee's fresh if you want some before you go." The casual dismissal in her voice made my skin crawl, but I just smiled and nodded. "Thanks. That's thoughtful." I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from her at the table. She resumed her phone conversation, talking about paint colors and furniture like I wasn't even there. Perfect. The more comfortable she was, the less attention she would pay to what I was actually doing. When Trevor came downstairs 20 minutes later, he was dressed for work in his best suit. He grabbed his coffee and briefcase, kissing Cassandra goodbye like this was already their established routine. "I'll be home around 6, he told her. "The Chinese delivery place has our order memorized if you get hungry before then." Our order. He was talking about the dinner we ordered every Thursday night for the past 3 years. Now it was their order. "Have a good day at work, honey," Cassandra called after him. After Trevor left, I waited exactly 15 minutes before I started making phone calls. Cassandra had moved to the living room and turned on morning talk shows, apparently planning to spend the day lounging in my house while I packed up my life. First, I called Janet Morrison, the lawyer Nicole had recommended. Her secretary said she could see me at 11 o'clock for an emergency consultation. Then I called my bank and asked them to freeze any joint accounts pending legal review. The representative explained that while Trevor could still access the accounts, Any large withdrawals would be flagged and require both signatures. Next, I called the mortgage company. After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached someone who could help me. I explained that there seemed to be some confusion about the ownership of my house and asked them to send me copies of all documents related to any ownership transfers. "Ma'am," the representative said, "I'm showing that you and Trevor Williams are still listed as joint owners of this property. We have no record of any ownership transfer or deed modification." My heart started racing. "Are you sure?" "Positive. Any change to the deed would have to be processed through our office since we hold the mortgage. Both owners would need to sign in the presence of a notary." I thanked her and hung up, my mind spinning. If the mortgage company had no record of a transfer, then either Trevor was lying about transferring the deed to Cassandra, or he had forged my signature on documents that hadn't been properly filed yet. I spent the next hour quietly gathering more evidence. I found Trevor's laptop in his home office and, using the password I had watched him type 100 times, accessed his email account. What I found there was even more damning than the financial records. There were emails between Trevor and Cassandra going back 8 months, full of explicit details about their affair and their plans to get rid of the wife problem. But more importantly, there were emails between Trevor and a man named Patrick Stevens, who appeared to be helping Trevor move money around and hide assets. One email from 2 weeks ago made my blood boil. "Patrick, I need you to expedite the paperwork for the house transfer. Cassandra's ready to move in, and I want Simone out before she has time to ask questions. She's not smart enough to figure out what's happening, but I don't want to take any chances. Once the divorce is final, we can move the rest of the business assets offshore like we discussed." Not smart enough. I screenshot the email and added it to my growing collection of evidence. But the most shocking discovery was in Trevor's sent folder from yesterday morning, just hours before I came home to find them together. It was an email to his business partner. "Jim, I'm going to need you to cover for me with the clients this week. Simone finally found out about Cassandra, so we're moving up the timeline. By Friday I'll have the divorce filed, the house transferred, and most of our liquid assets moved to secure accounts. Don't worry about the missing funds from the Morrison account. I'll have everything back before the audit next month." So Trevor knew I was going to find out about the affair. This whole scene yesterday wasn't spontaneous. It was planned, choreographed to make me feel powerless and rushed. They had expected me to crumble, to run away crying and never question the legalities of what they were doing. I was starting to understand that this wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated financial crime, and I was supposed to be the scapegoat. I heard Cassandra moving around in the kitchen, so I quickly logged out of Trevor's email and closed the laptop. When I walked back into the living room, she was flipping through a magazine and eating what looked like expensive yogurt from our refrigerator. "How's the packing going?" she asked without looking up. "Good," I said. "I should be out of here by this evening." "Great. Trevor, and I really appreciate how mature you're being about this. Some women would make things so much more difficult." I bit my tongue and just nodded. If she only knew what was coming. I spent the rest of the day continuing my preparations. I opened a new bank account at a different bank and had my paycheck direct deposit changed to the new account. I contacted my insurance company and removed Trevor as a beneficiary on my life insurance policy. I even called my principal at school and let her know that I might need a few personal days to handle some family matters. Most importantly, I packaged up copies of all the evidence I had gathered and delivered them to Janet Morrison's office, along with a detailed timeline of everything that had happened. By 6 o'clock, when Trevor came home from work, I had 3 suitcases packed with my most important belongings, but I was far from defeated. I was armed with information, legal representation, and a plan that neither Trevor nor Cassandra could have imagined. "All ready to go?" Trevor asked, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. "Almost," I said. "Just finishing up a few last things." Cassandra appeared from the kitchen, wrapping her arms around Trevor's waist. Perfect timing. I ordered Chinese food. Our usual. They were so confident, so satisfied with themselves. Trevor had no idea that his business partner was probably already fielding calls from investigators. Cassandra had no idea that the house she thought she owned was still legally mine. "Well," I said, picking up my car keys, "I'll leave you two to enjoy your evening." Trevor nodded dismissively. "Take care of yourself, Simone." As I walked toward the door with my suitcases, Cassandra called after me. "Oh, and Simone? Don't bother coming back for anything else. Whatever you left behind, we'll just donate to charity." I turned back and smiled at them both, standing there in the doorway of what they thought was their new home, looking like the picture of success and victory. "That's very generous of you," I said. "But I don't think I'll be needing to come back." because by tomorrow they would be the ones looking for a new place to live. I drove to my new temporary apartment with a smile on my face for the first time in 24 hours. It was a modest one-bedroom place across town, furnished and clean, with a month-to-month lease that had cost me most of my emergency savings. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was paid for with money Trevor couldn't touch. As I unpacked my suitcases, my phone rang. It was Janet Morrison. "Simone, I've reviewed all the documents you provided and I have some very good news. First, the deed transfer to Cassandra is completely invalid. Your husband forged your signature, and it was never properly notarized or filed with the county. The house is still legally yours." I sank into the single chair in my new living room, relief flooding through me. What does that mean exactly? It means Cassandra has no legal right to that house and neither does Trevor. Since you contributed the down payment from your inheritance and you're listed as a joint owner, you actually have a stronger claim to the property than he does, especially if you can prove the marriage is over due to his adultery. And the financial stuff? That's where things get very interesting. The evidence you found suggests your husband has been embezzling money from his clients. I've already contacted the district attorney's office, and they're very interested in speaking with you. They've apparently been investigating some irregularities in his business for the past month. My heart started pounding. He's already under investigation? It appears so. Your evidence just provided them with the missing pieces they needed. They'll want to interview you tomorrow, and they'll probably want access to any other financial records you might have. After I hung up with Janet, I realized that Trevor and Cassandra had no idea what was about to hit them. They were probably at home right now, toasting their success and planning their future together, completely oblivious to the fact that their world was about to collapse. But I wasn't done gathering evidence. If Trevor thought he could steal from his clients and use that money to finance his affair, he was about to learn a very expensive lesson. I spent the evening going through every document I had photographed, organizing them chronologically and cross-referencing the dates with Trevor's calendar that I had access to through our shared Google account. What I found painted a picture of systematic theft over the course of 8 months. Every time Trevor told me he was working late, he was actually with Cassandra. Every business trip he claimed to be taking was actually a romantic getaway funded with stolen money. Every expensive gift he had given me in the past year, the diamond earrings for my birthday, the weekend spa trip for our anniversary, had been purchased with money that belonged to his clients. I had been an unwitting accomplice to his crimes, and he had been planning to leave me holding the bag while he started fresh with Cassandra. The next morning, I met with the district attorney's investigator at Janet's office. Detective Rodriguez was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened to my story without interruption, taking notes and occasionally asking for clarification. "Mrs. Williams," she said when I finished, "your husband has been stealing money from a charity that helps underprivileged children get college scholarships. We've been trying to build a case against him for weeks, but we couldn't prove how the money was being diverted. Your evidence shows us exactly where it went." The charity detail hit me like a punch to the stomach. Trevor hadn't just been stealing from wealthy clients. He had been stealing from children who needed help getting an education. The man I had been married to for 12 years was capable of taking money meant for kids who had nothing. "What happens now?" I asked. "We'll execute search warrants on his home and office this afternoon. We'll need you to stay away from the house until we're finished processing the scene. Can you do that?" I nodded, thinking about Trevor and Cassandra having lunch in my kitchen at that very moment, probably planning their wedding while sitting on stolen money. "One more thing," Detective Rodriguez added. "When we arrest your husband, it's going to be very public. His business will be shut down, his assets will be frozen, and anyone associated with him will be under scrutiny. That includes his girlfriend. Are you prepared for that level of attention?" "Detective," I said, looking her straight in the eye, "my husband kicked me out of my own house yesterday to make room for his mistress. They planned to leave me homeless and broke while they built a new life with stolen money. I'm not just prepared for attention, I'm looking forward to it." That afternoon, I sat in my small apartment and watched the local news coverage of Trevor's arrest. The reporters stood outside our house, my house, while police officers carried boxes of evidence to their cars. Trevor was led away in handcuffs, his face pale and shocked. Cassandra stood in the doorway in her pajamas, screaming at the officers that there had been some mistake. But the best part was when the reporter interviewed one of the detectives on camera. "We're charging Mr. Williams with embezzlement, fraud, and identity theft," the detective said. "He's accused of stealing over $200,000 from the Children's Future Foundation over the past 8 months. We're also investigating possible accomplices who may have helped him hide the stolen funds." My phone started ringing immediately. The first call was from my sister in California, who had seen the news online. Then Nicole called, then other friends who had heard about the arrest. Everyone wanted to know if I was okay, if I had known about Trevor's crimes, if I needed anything. But the call that mattered most came at 6 o'clock that evening. It was Cassandra. "Simone," she said, her voice shaking with rage, "you need to call off whatever you've done. Trevor is innocent, and you're just trying to get revenge because he left you." "I'm sorry," I said calmly. "Who is this?" "You know who this is. Don't play games with me." "Oh, Cassandra. I thought you might be calling. How's your new house working out for you?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, "What do you mean?" "Well, since you don't actually own it, I imagine the police told you that you're technically trespassing. Did they give you a timeline for when you need to vacate my property?" "Your property?" "Trevor transferred the deed to me. Actually, he forged my signature on a document that was never legally filed. The house is still mine and it always has been. You've been living in my house without permission." I could hear her breathing getting faster. "You can't do this. We had a deal." "No, Trevor had a plan. And that plan involved committing multiple felonies and using you as an accomplice. I hope you kept receipts for all those expensive dinners and hotel rooms, because the IRS is going to want to know how you paid for them." The line went quiet for a long moment, then Cassandra whispered, "This isn't over." "Actually," I said, "it is. Have a good evening, Cassandra. And good luck finding a new place to stay." I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine, the first alcohol I'd had in 24 hours. Tomorrow I would start the process of reclaiming my house and my life. I would probably have to testify in Trevor's trial, and there would be months of legal proceedings ahead of me. But tonight, for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like myself again. Not the defeated woman who had been ordered to pack her bags and disappear quietly. Not the naive wife who had been blind to her husband's crimes. I was Simone Williams, homeowner, tax-paying citizen, and survivor. And I was just getting started. 3 days had passed since Trevor's arrest, and Cassandra had been forced to move out of my house under police supervision. According to Janet, she had taken only her personal belongings and left everything else behind, including the expensive furniture she had already purchased for her renovation plans. I decided to drive by the house to assess what needed to be done before I could move back in. It was strange approaching my own home after everything that had happened. The police tape was gone, but there were still tire marks on the lawn where the news vans had parked. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed my neighbor Mrs. Chen waving at me from her garden. She was an elderly woman who had lived next door since before Trevor and I moved in, and she had always been kind to me. "Simone," she called out. "I'm so glad to see you. I was worried about you after all that commotion." I walked over to the fence that separated our yards. "Hi, Mrs. Chen. I'm sorry about all the chaos. I'm sure it wasn't pleasant having police cars and news crews on the street." She waved dismissively. "Oh, honey, don't worry about that. I'm just glad the truth came out. I never liked that woman who was here with your husband." "You met Cassandra?" "Met her? She practically moved in 2 weeks ago. She was over here constantly, acting like she owned the place. Very rude woman. She told me to trim my rose bushes because they were blocking her view. 2 weeks ago. So Cassandra had been staying at my house even before Trevor served me with divorce papers. They had been planning this takeover for much longer than I had realized. Did you see much of what was going on over there?" I asked. Mrs. Chen's eyes lit up with the excitement of someone who had been waiting to share gossip. "Oh my, yes. They were having parties every night after you left. Loud music, people coming and going at all hours. That woman was ordering furniture deliveries and acting like she was the lady of the house." I felt a flash of anger at the image of strangers partying in my home while I slept on an air mattress in my temporary apartment. But then Mrs. Chen said something that made me smile. But the best part was watching her pack up yesterday after the police made her leave. She was crying and screaming about how unfair everything was. Some of those fancy delivery men came back to repossess furniture she apparently couldn't pay for. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside my house for the first time in 4 days. The silence was eerie after years of it being filled with the sounds of daily life. Trevor's belongings were gone. The police had taken most of his things as evidence, and what remained had been boxed up by his lawyer. But Cassandra had left her mark everywhere. The living room furniture had been rearranged, there were paint samples taped to the walls, and someone had removed all my family photos from the mantelpiece and replaced them with expensive-looking candles and fake flowers. In the kitchen, I found evidence of their celebration dinners, expensive wine bottles in the trash, takeout containers from restaurants I couldn't afford, and a grocery receipt for items that cost more than I usually spent in a week. They had been living like royalty on stolen money while I worried about paying for my temporary apartment. The master bedroom was the worst. Cassandra had completely redecorated with new bedding, new curtains, and new artwork. My grandmother's quilt, which had been on our bed for 8 years, was stuffed in a garbage bag in the closet like it was trash. But as I walked through the house, documenting the changes for insurance purposes, I started to feel something unexpected: relief. This house didn't feel like mine anymore, and that was actually liberating. All the memories of my marriage to Trevor, all the plans we had made and dreams we had shared were tied up in these rooms. Now I could start fresh. My phone rang as I was standing in the kitchen, looking at the space where Cassandra had apparently planned to install a wine refrigerator. "Simone, it's Janet. I have some updates for you." "Good news or bad news?" "Mostly good. Trevor's bail hearing was yesterday, and they set it at $500,000. His business assets are frozen, and his lawyer says he doesn't have access to that kind of money. So he's staying in jail? For now. But here's the interesting part: Cassandra tried to post his bail yesterday. I nearly dropped the phone. What? She showed up at the courthouse with a cashier's check for $50,000, apparently thinking that was enough for the 10% required by a bail bondsman. When they told her she needed the full amount, she became very upset and started making accusations against you. What kind of accusations? She claims you planted evidence against Trevor and that you're framing him because you're jealous. The judge was not impressed with her outburst. I walked into my home office, which looked exactly the same as when I had left it. Cassandra apparently hadn't been interested in the room where I paid bills and graded papers. Not glamorous enough for her renovation plans. "Janet, where would Cassandra get $50,000? According to everything I found, she doesn't have a job." "That's a very good question. The district attorney's office is wondering the same thing. They're looking into whether she received money from Trevor that she didn't report to the court." After I hung up with Janet, I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning my house and reclaiming my space. I took down Cassandra's decorations, put my family photos back on the mantelpiece, and restored my grandmother's quilt to its place of honor on my bed. But as I worked, I kept thinking about that $50,000. Where had Cassandra gotten that kind of money? And why was she so desperate to get Trevor out of jail? That evening, I was heating up leftover soup for dinner when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see a woman I didn't recognize, middle-aged, well-dressed, with short gray hair and an expensive handbag. "Ms. Williams?" she said when I opened the door. "My name is Patricia Stevens. I think we need to talk." The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "I'm Patrick Stevens' wife. My husband has been helping your ex-husband hide money from his business. But after Trevor's arrest, Patrick told me everything, and I think you deserve to know what really happened." I invited her in and made coffee while she explained how her husband had been helping Trevor move stolen money through a series of shell companies and offshore accounts. According to Patricia, Trevor had been planning this for over a year, long before he met Cassandra. "Patrick thought it was just tax avoidance at first," she said. "Rich people do that all the time, unfortunately. But when he realized Trevor was stealing from a children's charity, he wanted out. Trevor threatened to implicate Patrick in the scheme if he didn't continue helping." "What does this have to do with Cassandra?" Patricia set down her coffee cup and looked me directly in the eye. "Cassandra isn't just Trevor's mistress. She's his business partner. She's been helping him steal that money from the beginning. The whole affair, the quick divorce, the house transfer, it was all designed to hide assets before the investigation caught up with them." I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. "You're saying she was in on it from the start?" "I'm saying she was the one who suggested the plan. Trevor was just supposed to be the front man because he had access to the charity's accounts. Cassandra has been the mastermind all along." As Patricia continued to explain the scope of Trevor and Cassandra's partnership, I realized that I hadn't just been betrayed by an unfaithful husband. I had been the target of an elaborate criminal conspiracy designed to destroy my life while they profited from stolen money meant for disadvantaged children. But now I had something they didn't expect: the truth. And I was going to make sure everyone else knew it too. The next morning brought news that changed everything. I woke up to 17 missed calls from Janet Morrison and a voice message that made my heart race. "Simone, call me as soon as you get this. Cassandra has been arrested. They're charging her as Trevor's accomplice in the embezzlement scheme. We need to talk immediately." I called Janet back while making coffee, my hands shaking with anticipation. "They got her," Janet said without preamble. "Patricia Stevens wore a wire when she met with Cassandra yesterday evening. Cassandra confessed to everything. The embezzlement, the fake affair designed to throw off investigators, even her plan to frame you as an accomplice. Wait, what do you mean fake affair? According to the recording, Cassandra and Trevor were never romantically involved. The whole relationship was a business arrangement. She needed someone with access to charity funds, and he needed someone to help him launder the money. The affair was just window dressing to make it look like a crime of passion instead of premeditated fraud. I sank into my kitchen chair, trying to process this information. The intimate moments I had witnessed, the casual familiarity between them, even the way they had dismissed me, it had all been an act designed to manipulate me into walking away quietly. But they seemed so together, I said weakly. Cassandra is apparently a very good actress. She used to work in theater before she got into financial crimes. This isn't her first time using a fake relationship to access someone's assets. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My marriage hadn't been destroyed by love or passion. It had been destroyed by cold, calculated greed. Trevor hadn't left me for someone he cared about. He had sold our 12-year marriage for money that didn't even belong to him. What happens now? I asked. Both of them are going to trial. Trevor's lawyer is trying to claim he was manipulated by Cassandra, while her lawyer is arguing she was just following Trevor's lead. They're turning on each other, which is good for the prosecution. After I hung up with Janet, I sat in my kitchen and tried to understand how I had missed so many signs. But then I realized that I hadn't missed anything. I had been deliberately deceived by two people who were experts at manipulation. My phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. Simone Williams? The voice was male, professional. Yes. This is Detective Martinez with the Financial Crimes Unit. We need you to come in for an interview this afternoon. We've discovered some additional evidence that suggests you may have been an intended victim of a larger fraud scheme. At the police station, Detective Martinez showed me documents that made my stomach turn. There were insurance policies taken out on my life with Trevor as the beneficiary, forged loan applications using my identity, and even a fake will that left everything to Trevor in case of my accidental death. Mrs. Williams, Detective Martinez said gently, we believe that if their original plan had worked, they would have found a way to eliminate you entirely. You weren't just being divorced, you were being set up to disappear. I thought about the 24-hour ultimatum, the pressure to leave quickly, the way they had wanted me gone before I could ask questions. If I had been more compliant, more trusting, I might have signed papers that stripped me of all my assets. And then what? An accident? A suicide made to look convincing? The good news, Detective Martinez continued, is that your quick thinking and documentation probably saved your life. By fighting back immediately and preserving evidence, you made it impossible for them to complete their plan. When I left the police station that afternoon, I felt like I was seeing the world clearly for the first time in months. Trevor's recent behavior, the way he had been pushing me to update my will, his insistence that I get life insurance through his company, his suggestion that I transfer my teaching pension to an account he managed, suddenly made terrifying sense. I drove home and called my sister Isabella in California. I hadn't spoken to her since Trevor's arrest, and she deserved to know what was really happening. Simone, she said when she answered, I've been so worried about you. I saw the news about Trevor online. Are you okay? I gave her the full story, from finding Trevor and Cassandra in my living room to the revelation that they had been planning something much worse than divorce. Isabella was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Then she said, Simone, I have to tell you something. Trevor called me 3 weeks ago asking about your inheritance from Grandma Elena. He wanted to know if there were any other accounts or properties you might have forgotten about. My blood went cold. What did you tell him? I didn't tell him anything because I thought it was weird that he didn't know. But now I'm wondering. Simone, he also asked me about your health. If you had any medical conditions, if you were taking any medications, if you ever had accidents or got dizzy. He was gathering information, I said, more to myself than to Isabella. For what? I thought about the forged will, the life insurance policies, the pressure to sign financial documents quickly. I think he was planning to kill me, Isabella. The words hung in the air between us. Saying it out loud made it real in a way that all the police interviews and legal documents hadn't. Oh my God, Isabella whispered. Simone, you need to be careful. Even if they're both in jail now, they might have had other people helping them. After I hung up with my sister, I spent the evening going through my house with new eyes. I checked every lock, every window, every entrance. I changed the security codes and installed new deadbolts. I even called a security company to install cameras and an alarm system. But as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a car door slam outside. I looked through my bedroom window and saw a black sedan parked across the street with its engine running. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, but I couldn't make out their face in the darkness. I watched for 10 minutes and the car didn't move. When I called the police, they said they would send a patrol car to check it out. But by the time the officer arrived 15 minutes later, the sedan was gone. Probably just someone visiting a neighbor, the officer said. But keep an eye out and call us if you see anything suspicious. That night I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, every shadow outside my window looked like a person. I realized that even though Trevor and Cassandra were in jail, their plan had already succeeded in one way: they had made me afraid in my own home. But as I lay awake listening to the house settle around me, I made a decision. I wasn't going to live in fear. I was going to make sure that everyone involved in this conspiracy paid for what they had tried to do to me. And I was going to rebuild my life in a way that made it impossible for anyone to ever victimize me again. 2 weeks after Cassandra's arrest, I was finally starting to feel safe in my own home again. The security system was installed, I had changed all the locks, and the mysterious black sedan hadn't returned. But just as I was beginning to relax, Janet called with news that turned my world upside down once again. "Simone, we have a problem. Trevor made bail this morning." I nearly dropped the phone. "How is that possible? You said he didn't have access to that kind of money." "Someone posted bail for him anonymously. $500,000 in cash, delivered to the courthouse by a lawyer who won't reveal who his client is." I felt my carefully rebuilt sense of security crumble. "So he's free? For now. But there are conditions: he can't leave the county, he can't contact you directly, and he has to wear an ankle monitor. The district attorney's office has also assigned you a victim's advocate and increased police patrols in your neighborhood." After I hung up with Janet, I called Detective Martinez immediately. "Detective, I need to know who posted Trevor's bail. This feels like part of the original conspiracy." "We're investigating that," he assured me. "But Mrs. Williams, I need to tell you something else. We've discovered that this fraud scheme was much bigger than we initially thought. Trevor and Cassandra weren't working alone. They were part of a network that's been targeting wealthy widows and divorcees across 3 states. A network. Professional con artists who specialize in romance scams and identity theft. They identify vulnerable women, establish relationships, and then systematically drain their assets. You were supposed to be their biggest score yet." The revelation made me feel sick. Everything about my marriage, everything I had believed about Trevor's love for me, had been a lie from the very beginning. I wasn't just an inconvenient wife standing in the way of his affair, I was a mark who had outlived her usefulness. "Detective, how many other women have they done this to?" "We've identified at least 12 victims over the past 5 years. Some lost their life savings, some lost their homes, and 3 of them, Mrs. Williams, 3 of them died under suspicious circumstances right before their cases could go to trial." I spent the rest of the day installing additional security measures and making plans to stay with friends until Trevor's trial was over. But that evening, as I was packing a bag, I heard something that made my blood freeze: the sound of a key turning in my front door. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 while creeping toward my bedroom window. But before I could climb out, I heard a familiar voice calling my name. "Simone? It's me. We need to talk." Trevor was in my house. I stayed hidden in my bedroom with the door locked while whispering to the 911 operator. Through the door, I could hear Trevor moving around the living room, opening drawers and cabinets like he was looking for something. "I know you're here, Simone," he called out. "Your car's in the driveway. I just want to talk. I can explain everything." The police arrived within 5 minutes, but Trevor didn't resist when they arrested him. As they led him away in handcuffs for the second time, he looked directly at me and smiled. "This isn't over," he said calmly. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." Detective Martinez questioned me for 2 hours about what Trevor might have been looking for in my house. When we checked, nothing seemed to be missing, but my home office had been thoroughly searched. Every drawer was open, every file had been rifled through. "He was looking for something specific," Detective Martinez concluded. "Do you have any idea what?" I thought about it for a moment, then remembered something. The original documents from my grandmother's estate. The inheritance paperwork that proved I owned the house. I kept all of that in my filing cabinet. We checked the cabinet together, and sure enough, the folder containing my inheritance documentation was gone. "Why would he need those papers?" I asked. Detective Martinez looked grim. "Because without them, it's going to be much harder for you to prove you have a legal right to this house. If Trevor's criminal organization has lawyers working for them, they might be planning to challenge your ownership in civil court while the criminal case is pending." That night, I stayed in a hotel room paid for by the Victims Assistance Program. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed, I realized that Trevor and his associates were systematically dismantling my life piece by piece. First, they had tried to steal my house through fraud. When that failed, they had tried to frame me as an accomplice. Now they were trying to destroy the evidence that proved my legal rights. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated how thoroughly I had documented everything. The papers Trevor stole were originals, but I had photocopied and scanned every document months ago. I had digital backups stored in multiple locations, and I had already provided copies to both Janet and the district attorney's office. The next morning, I called Janet with a plan. I want to go on the offensive, I told her. These people have been targeting women for years, and they're still out there looking for new victims. I want to help the police catch them. Simone, that could be dangerous. We're talking about people who may have committed murder. Which is exactly why they need to be stopped. Detective Martinez said they've identified 12 victims so far. How many more women are going to lose everything or die if we don't act? Janet was quiet for a moment. What did you have in mind? I want to work with the police as a cooperating witness. I want to help them build cases against everyone involved in this network. And I want to make sure that no other woman goes through what I've been through. That afternoon, I met with Detective Martinez and the district attorney to discuss my proposal. They were initially reluctant, but when I showed them additional evidence I had uncovered, including emails between Trevor and other suspected members of the fraud network, they agreed to let me help. Mrs. Williams, the district attorney said, if you do this, you'll be putting yourself at considerable risk. These people have already tried to destroy your life once. If they realize you're actively working against them, they might try more direct methods. I thought about the 3 women who had died before their cases could go to trial. I thought about the 12 women who had lost their life savings to these predators. I thought about how many more victims there might be if this network continued to operate. I understand the risks, I said. But I also understand that if I don't fight back, they win. And I'm not going to let them win. As I left the district attorney's office that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: purpose. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just reacting to what Trevor and his associates were doing to me. I was taking control of the situation. And I was going to make sure that every single person involved in this conspiracy paid for what they had done, not just to me but to all the women they had victimized over the years. The war was just beginning. Working as a cooperating witness turned out to be more complex than I had imagined. Detective Martinez introduced me to Agent Sarah Kim from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, who explained that Trevor and Cassandra were part of a sophisticated criminal enterprise that operated across state lines. This organization has been active for at least 7 years, Agent Kim told me during our first briefing. They target educated, financially stable women who are either recently divorced or widowed. They use romance, marriage, and fake business partnerships to gain access to their victims' assets. How do they find their targets? Social media, dating apps, professional networking events, even charity functions. They're very good at identifying women who have money but are emotionally vulnerable. Agent Kim showed me photographs of 12 other women who had been victimized by the network. Looking at their faces, teachers, nurses, small business owners, retirees, I realized that any one of them could have been me under different circumstances. What happened to the 3 women who died? I asked. Agent Kim's expression darkened. 1 apparent suicide, 1 car accident, and 1 accidental overdose. All 3 died within weeks of discovering they had been defrauded, and all 3 had been preparing to testify against their attackers. I thought about how close I had come to being number 4. The good news, Agent Kim continued, is that your case has given us more evidence than we've ever had before. Your documentation, combined with Patricia Stevens' cooperation, has allowed us to map out the entire network structure. She showed me a chart that looked like something from a crime drama. Trevor and Cassandra were just 2 small pieces of a much larger operation that included fake lawyers, corrupt notaries, money launderers, and even people who specialized in making deaths look accidental. We believe the person who posted Trevor's bail is someone high up in this organization. They're trying to keep him quiet before he decides to cooperate with us. That afternoon, Agent Kim asked me to do something that terrified me: make contact with Trevor. We want to set up a recorded phone call, she explained. If we can get him to talk about the larger organization, it could help us identify other victims and perpetrators. Why would he talk to me? He knows I'm the reason he's in jail. Because he's desperate. His bail conditions mean he can't leave town, he can't access any of his assets, and his co-conspirators are probably pressuring him to keep quiet. We think he might try to convince you to drop the charges in exchange for information about where your money went. The plan was simple but dangerous. I would call Trevor from a secure location while FBI agents recorded the conversation. I would pretend to be willing to negotiate, hoping he would reveal details about the criminal network or admit to specific crimes. 2 days later, I sat in an FBI surveillance van outside a shopping mall, wearing a wire and surrounded by agents. My hands were shaking as I dialed Trevor's number. Simone. He answered on the first ring, his voice eager and desperate. Hello, Trevor. Thank God you called. I've been trying to figure out how to reach you. We need to talk. About what? About fixing this mess. Look, I know you're angry and you have every right to be. But if you keep pushing this prosecution, we're both going to lose everything. I forced myself to stay calm. What do you mean? The people I was working with, they're not going to let this go to trial. They have too much to lose. If you don't drop the charges, they're going to make sure both of us disappear. Are you threatening me, Trevor? I'm trying to save your life. These people have killed before, Simone. They made it look like accidents, but they murdered 3 women who got too close to exposing them. Agent Kim nodded at me encouragingly. This was exactly the kind of admission they needed. Who are these people? I asked. Trevor lowered his voice. There's a man named Richard Hawthorne who runs the whole operation. He has lawyers, accountants, even people in law enforcement working for him. Cassandra and I were just small-time players. Where is this Richard Hawthorne? I don't know. Nobody knows. He communicates through intermediaries, and he only meets people face-to-face when he's planning to eliminate them. I felt a chill run down my spine. Trevor, how many women have you done this to? There was a long pause. When Trevor spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. 12 that I know of. But Simone, I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I thought we were just stealing money from rich people who wouldn't miss it. I didn't know about the murders until after we were already involved. What about the children's charity? Those weren't rich people. That was money meant to help kids go to college. That was Cassandra's idea. She said it would be easier to steal from a charity because they have less security oversight. I never wanted to do that job, but she said Hawthorne was getting impatient with our progress. Agent Kim was writing furiously, documenting every detail Trevor revealed. Trevor, why should I believe anything you're telling me? You've been lying to me for months. Because I still love you, he said, and for a moment he sounded like the man I had married 12 years ago. Everything with Cassandra was fake, Simone. The whole relationship was just part of the job. She's not even attracted to men. She has a girlfriend in Nevada who thinks she's been away on business this whole time. I thought about all the intimate moments I had witnessed between them, all the casual affection that had made me feel so worthless and replaced. Even their chemistry had been an act designed to manipulate me. If you really love me, I said, then help me stop these people. Testify against Richard Hawthorne and help the FBI arrest everyone involved. I can't do that. If I cooperate with the FBI, I'm dead. Hawthorne has people everywhere, including in law enforcement. The only way either of us survives this is if you drop the charges and we both disappear. I'm not running away, Trevor. I'm not going to let these people hurt anyone else. Then you're going to get us both killed. The line went dead. Agent Kim immediately started making phone calls to other agents and local police. Within an hour, they had identified Richard Hawthorne as a suspect in multiple ongoing investigations across several states. Mrs. Williams, Agent Kim said, what you just did was incredibly brave, but it's also put you in immediate danger. Trevor essentially confirmed that this criminal organization commits murder to protect itself, and now they know you're actively working with law enforcement. That night, I was moved to a safe house while the FBI worked to identify and arrest other members of the network. As I sat in the anonymous hotel room, guarded by federal agents, I realized that my decision to fight back had escalated far beyond anything I could have imagined. But I also realized that for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't afraid. I was angry and I was determined, and I was going to see this through to the end. The next morning, Agent Kim woke me with news that changed everything. We found Richard Hawthorne, she said. And you're never going to believe who he really is. Richard Hawthorne is actually Dr. Robert Harrison, Agent Kim explained, showing me a photograph of a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. He's a retired psychiatrist who used his knowledge of human psychology to develop this fraud network. But here's the shocking part, he's been operating out of the office building right next to where you work. I stared at the photo, my mind racing. Next to my school? 3 blocks away. His front company provides financial counseling for divorced women. He's been identifying targets by offering free consultations to women going through difficult divorces, then passing their information to his network of criminals. The revelation made me feel sick. Dr. Harrison had probably been watching me for months, studying my routines, gathering information about my marriage and finances. I might have walked past his office building hundreds of times without knowing that the man inside was planning to destroy my life. We raided his office early this morning, Agent Kim continued. What we found is going to put him away for the rest of his life. She showed me photographs from the raid, filing cabinets full of personal information on potential victims, detailed psychological profiles, financial records, and even surveillance photos of women going about their daily lives. There were photos of me leaving school, shopping for groceries, and having dinner with friends. We also found evidence linking him to the 3 suspicious deaths, Agent Kim said. He kept detailed records of every operation, including the ones that ended in murder. That afternoon, I watched the news coverage of Dr. Harrison's arrest from the FBI safe house. The reporter stood outside his office building while agents carried out boxes of evidence. The headline read, "Local psychiatrist arrested in multi-state fraud ring targeting divorced women." But the story that really caught my attention was the follow-up report about Trevor and Cassandra. In a related development, the reporter said, Trevor Williams, who was released on bail earlier this week, was found dead in his hotel room this morning. Police are investigating the death as a possible suicide, though sources close to the investigation suggest it may have been murder made to look like suicide. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Despite everything Trevor had done to me, despite the lies and the theft and the plan to eliminate me entirely, he was still the man I had been married to for 12 years. And now he was dead. Agent Kim sat down next to me. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams. I know this must be difficult for you. Was it really suicide?" The preliminary investigation suggests he was murdered. Someone accessed his hotel room using a key card programmed by hotel security, which suggests either inside help or professional expertise. There was no suicide note, and the method used was consistent with murders we've seen in other cases involving this criminal network. I thought about Trevor's warning during our recorded phone call. If I cooperate with the FBI, I'm dead. He had been right. What about Cassandra? She's agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for witness protection. She's provided us with information about 12 other active members of the network, including the person who posted Trevor's bail. That evening, Agent Kim arranged for me to speak with Cassandra via secure video link. It was surreal seeing her again, sitting in what looked like a federal detention facility, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of the expensive clothes she had worn while living in my house. "Simone," she said when she saw me on the screen, "I need you to know that I never wanted anyone to get hurt. When I joined this organization, I thought we were just stealing money from rich people who could afford it." "You were stealing money meant for children," I said coldly. "I know, and I'm sorry. That was Dr. Harrison's idea, not mine. He said charities were easier targets because they don't have the same security oversight as banks." "Tell me about the murders, Cassandra." She was quiet for a long moment. "The first one I knew about was a woman named Margaret Foster in Arizona. She had discovered that her boyfriend was stealing from her retirement account and she was about to go to the police. Dr. Harrison sent someone to make it look like she had killed herself out of shame and depression." "How many others?" "3 that I know of for certain, but probably more. Dr. Harrison told us that sometimes problems had to be solved permanently to protect the organization. I thought he was just trying to scare us into staying quiet. I thought about how close I had come to being one of those problems that needed to be solved permanently." "Cassandra, why are you telling me this now?" "Because Trevor is dead and I know I'm next if I don't cooperate. Dr. Harrison has people everywhere, police officers, court clerks, even FBI agents. The only way any of us survive this is if the whole organization gets exposed." After the video call ended, Agent Kim told me that Cassandra's information had led to arrests in 4 states. The FBI was dismantling the entire network, seizing assets, and identifying victims going back 7 years. "Mrs. Williams, I need to prepare you for what's coming next. This case is going to be national news. You're going to be the primary witness in one of the largest fraud prosecutions in federal history. Are you ready for that level of attention?" I thought about the 12 women whose photos I had seen, the 3 who had died to protect this criminal enterprise, and the countless other potential victims who were still out there, unaware that they were being targeted. "I'm ready," I said. The next morning brought news that felt like vindication. Dr. Harrison had been denied bail and was being held in federal custody pending trial. The judge had called him a danger to the community and a flight risk, noting that he had access to false identity documents and offshore accounts. But more importantly, the FBI had recovered over $3 million in stolen assets and had begun the process of returning money to victims. While I would never get back the emotional damage from this experience, I would at least recover financially. Agent Kim also told me that my cooperation had directly led to the identification of 5 women who were currently being targeted by the network. All 5 had been contacted and warned, potentially saving them from losing their life savings or worse. Mrs. Williams, Agent Kim said, what you've done is going to prevent dozens of other women from going through what you experienced. You should be proud of that. As I sat in the safe house that morning reading news reports about the arrests and asset seizures, I realized that I had accomplished something I never could have imagined when Trevor first handed me those divorce papers. I had brought down an entire criminal enterprise. But more than that, I had proven to myself that I was stronger than I ever knew. The scared, betrayed woman who had been ordered to pack her bags and disappear in 24 hours no longer existed. In her place was someone who had fought back and won. The nightmare was almost over. And I was ready to start building a new life from the ashes of the old one. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse waiting for Dr. Harrison's sentencing hearing. He had pleaded guilty to racketeering, fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder in exchange for life in prison without the possibility of parole. 18 other members of his network had also been convicted, and the FBI estimated that their investigation had prevented over 50 additional women from being victimized. Cassandra received a reduced sentence of 12 years in exchange for her cooperation. She would be eligible for parole in 8 years, and she would spend the rest of her life in witness protection. During her victim impact statement, she looked directly at me and said, "I'm sorry, Simone. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to hear it." I had spent months in therapy working through the trauma of discovering that my entire marriage had been a lie. Dr. Amanda Foster, my therapist, helped me understand that Trevor had been groomed by Dr. Harrison just as much as I had been targeted. The difference was that Trevor had chosen to become a willing participant in the criminal enterprise, while I had been selected as a victim. "You survived something that killed other women," Dr. Foster told me during one of our sessions. "That's not luck, that's strength. You trusted your instincts, you fought back, and you refused to be silenced. That takes extraordinary courage." The house that had been the center of so much conflict was now truly mine. The courts had confirmed my ownership rights, and the insurance settlement from Trevor's death had allowed me to pay off the remaining mortgage. But I had decided to sell it anyway. Too many bad memories lived in those rooms, and I was ready for a completely fresh start. I used the money from the house sale, combined with my recovered assets and a victim compensation payment from the federal government, to buy a smaller but more beautiful home across town. It had big windows, a garden where I could grow vegetables, and most importantly, no history of deception or betrayal. My career had also taken an unexpected turn. The media attention from the case had led to speaking engagements where I talked about recognizing the warning signs of financial fraud. I had started a nonprofit organization called Second Chances, which provided support and resources to women who had been victimized by romance scams and financial fraud. "The most important thing to understand," I told audiences at my speaking engagements, "is that being targeted by these criminals doesn't mean you're stupid or naive. These people are professionals who study human psychology and exploit our natural desire to trust and love. The shame belongs to them, not to their victims." 3 weeks after Dr. Harrison's sentencing, I was working in my new garden when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a man I didn't recognize, tall, with graying hair and kind eyes, holding a bouquet of flowers. "Ms. Williams?" he said when I opened the door. "My name is Charles Peterson. I'm Margaret Foster's brother." Margaret Foster was the first woman Dr. Harrison's network had murdered, the one whose death had been made to look like suicide. I had met her family during the trial, but I was surprised to see Charles at my home. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," he said. "I wanted to thank you in person for what you did. If you hadn't fought back, Margaret's death would have remained unsolved, and those criminals would still be out there hurting other women." I invited him in for coffee, and we spent the afternoon talking about Margaret, her love of painting, her volunteer work with animal shelters, her plans to travel after retirement. Charles showed me photos of her, and I could see the family resemblance in their warm smiles. "She would have been proud of you," Charles said as he was leaving. "Margaret always said that the only way to defeat bullies was to stand up to them, no matter how scary they seemed." That evening, I sat in my new kitchen, looking out at the garden I was building and thinking about the journey that had brought me here. 12 months ago, I had been a woman whose husband handed her divorce papers and told her she had 24 hours to disappear from her own life. I had felt powerless, betrayed, and utterly alone. Now I was a homeowner, a business owner, a public speaker, and a survivor who had helped bring justice to women I had never met. I had learned that I was capable of far more than I had ever imagined, not just in terms of fighting back against criminals, but in terms of rebuilding my life from scratch. My phone rang, interrupting my reflection. It was Isabella calling from California. "Simone, I have news. I got the promotion. I'm moving back to our hometown next month, which means I'll only be 2 hours away from you instead of across the country." I smiled, thinking about how good it would be to have family nearby again. "That's wonderful. We can see each other all the time." "And I have more news," Isabella continued, her voice taking on a teasing tone. "Mom's friend Elena says her son David is recently divorced and looking to meet someone. She thinks you two would hit it off." "Isabella," I said, laughing, "I'm not ready to date anyone yet. I'm still figuring out who I am as a single person." I know. But when you are ready, just remember that not all men are criminals. Some of them are actually decent human beings." After I hung up with my sister, I walked through my new house, turning off lights and locking doors. In my bedroom, I looked at the framed photo on my nightstand, not a picture of Trevor or our wedding, but a photo of all the women whose lives had been destroyed by Dr. Harrison's network. Their faces reminded me every day why I had fought back and why my new work was so important. As I got ready for bed, I reflected on how different my life looked now compared to a year ago. I was no longer Mrs. Trevor Williams, the trusting wife who had been so easily manipulated. I was Simone Williams, survivor, advocate, and woman who had learned that she was strong enough to rebuild her entire life after it had been destroyed. I had lost a marriage, but I had gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I could handle whatever life threw at me. I had discovered that being alone didn't mean being lonely, and that independence could be more fulfilling than any relationship built on lies. The last thing I did before turning off the lights was check my laptop for emails about second chances. There were 3 messages from women who had attended my latest speaking engagement, thanking me for giving them hope and the courage to report the men who had been scamming them. One message from a woman named Rachel in Phoenix particularly moved me. "Dear Simone, after hearing your story, I realized that my boyfriend has been stealing from my retirement account. I went to the police today and filed a report. I wanted to thank you for showing me that I don't have to be a victim. I can fight back too." I closed the laptop and smiled. Tomorrow I would start planning another speaking engagement. Next week, I would help another woman recognize the warning signs of financial fraud. Next month, I would continue building a life that was entirely my own, free from deception and manipulation. Trevor had thought he was giving me 24 hours to disappear from my own life. Instead, he had given me the motivation to build a better life than I had ever imagined possible. And as I drifted off to sleep in my new home, surrounded by evidence of the life I had built with my own strength and determination, I realized that I had never been happier to be exactly who I was. The revenge was complete, but more importantly, the healing had begun.